Hello and welcome to this special edition of ACM's Vault of Cult. We finished the first season at the end of last year with an episode about the movies Maniac Cop and The Drifting Classroom. I'm waiting for lockdown to be over so I can do the second series. I really do prefer to talk to people about films in person opposed to over Zoom, but it's been a while, so I thought let's do a special episode before the second season starts. I'll be talking to film academic Adam, who's based in Suffolk. He's been on the show before with his partner Antonia a couple of times. He was on the last episode and we discussed Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 way back in October as well. He recently watched the film and we had a good old chat about it. And this is a different film to what we usually do. It wasn't made in the 80s or 90s. It's only 5 years old, but has already got cult status. And I think it's got the feel of the older movie. So as this is a kind of a special episode, it's done over Zoom, as I say, so slightly different to what we'd normally do. I thought go for a different film. And I think Adam quite enjoyed it. This is the conversation we had about the movie. Okay, I'm here with Adam, who has just seen Turbo Kid. Firstly, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was a great bunch of lads. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so had you heard anything about the film before I sort of asked you to watch it?
Only Antonia saying that it was great and you got her to watch it.
Okay.
So I've only heard about it in relation to you.
Okay, so you hadn't seen anything about it at all. I mean, it was on Netflix for a while and...
I don't use much Netflix. When I do, it's more for the occasional series, and like Monty Python these days.
Okay. So firstly, what things did you sort of most like about the film? I'll sort of start with the positive.
I really like the fact that in some ways it's this 80s throwback movie, but it doesn't feel ironic. I really like the fact that it's doing something kind of postmodern, but it's doing it really earnestly. And I really like the fact that it feels committed to almost a child's viewpoint. Like, it's a bit like playing make-believe as a kid. You know, yeah. I love the fact that all the bike races are on push bikes rather than motorbikes.
Yeah.
Like, for a film that's really violent and bloody, it's weirdly wholesome. Like, it's almost, I wouldn't quite say a feel-good film, but, you know, it's a lot of fun. And you can't say that about many dystopian films.
No, that's true. You say would you describe it as it's sort of laughing with the genre opposed to laughing at it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, it doesn't feel like mocking or mean-spirited. You know, it feels like it's a tribute to films that the filmmakers really love. So I think that goes a long way. And also the performances are really committed. Like, it feels like everyone's really game and everyone's on the same page. So I think that makes a really big difference.
Yeah, I think that is noticeable. They all seem to be enjoying themselves as they do it.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't feel like anyone's going through the motions.
No, exactly. Even Michael Ironside, who has sort of had his day, so to speak, is sort of the main villain in it. He seems to be giving it his all and kind of enjoying what he's doing in the sort of over the top, almost, you know, you could see him as like a Skeletor or that sort of 80s villain.
Yeah, totally.
When you said about the gore in it as well, Monroe Chambers, who plays the kid, the main character, has described what he said he liked about it is it's basically all gore and all heart, and I think that combination.
That's a nice description.
Yeah, and
I mean, it reminded me a bit of Brain Dead in that sense.
Yeah, it's got that.
The Peter Jackson film.
Yeah, my favourite Peter Jackson film still.
Yeah, well, obviously, yeah.
Yeah. But it's got it very, very likable, and even though it is, you know, it's really gory in parts, it's kind of cartoony as well, and it's so over the top that it's enjoyable gore, which in say Mad Max, for example, which is the same. I mean, this film's been described as Mad Max on BMXs. That's more brutal and dark. There are moments where the gore will bring a smile to your face, but in this, it's almost slapsticky. It is slapsticky.
Oh yeah.
And the film's got 3 directors, and one of them described it as they wanted to make a Bugs Bunny for adults in a way, and you can sort of see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like the Black Knight scene in Monty Python and Holy Grail.
Yeah, definitely, and the fact that some of the costumes and stuff of the villains sort of remind you of that as well. Sort of they
Mm.
with the helmets and you know it has got that that Holy Grail feel.
Yeah, like it's not quite janky, but it
Yeah,
does have this. I don't know. It manages to feel kind of homemade, but not amateurish. If
yeah,
that
that,
makes sense.
yeah. It's because sort of things like all the squirt and blood has got a very
Yeah,
B movie, like you said, for Peter Jackson feel, but it's so well done that it doesn't actually, when you're watching it, it doesn't seem like it's that low budget. I think that
yeah.
the production value is quite good. I think, and the fact that a lot of it's filmed in the desert as well,
I think
make
that helps.
yeah, and but then the scenes early on, sort of in warehouses and that sort of thing. It's for no point I feel on watching a low budget film when you watch a lot of films like that, and you can just tell they've just filmed it somewhere randomly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't know what cameras were used, but they felt like decent cameras.
Yeah,
I don't know, like Black Magic or something. I
yeah,
don't really know my cameras, but like I think
yeah,
that goes a long way sometimes.
yeah,
I don't think the film would have worked if it was, say it'd been shot on, video camcorder
yeah,
like 20 years back or something. I don't think it would have. I don't know. I think it needs to look as good as it does to
yeah,
work.
yeah. You don't. I mean, and a film like this. I mean, it basically done a festival run, and I think it showed on 31 cinemas in America. So basically, it was a straight to DVD release.
Yeah.
Um, I came away thinking I wish I'd seen that in the cinema, where a lot
Oh,
of these sort of
yeah.
films I don't. I'm perfectly happy watching them at home because that's what they're intended for. Um, so I think the reason I picked this as a different one to do, as a more modern cult film, is in a short space of time it's got that cult following, and I think
Mm,
that just the standard of it makes it stand out from other really good low budget films. Um,
yeah.
and it's we mentioned the gore. I mean, what did you think of the special effects in general?
Well, I really tend to, obviously it's got some kind of post-production stuff, but obviously there's a lot of in-camera special effects. There's a lot of practical effects,
Yeah,
and I always like, the materiality, the realness of practical effects.
yeah,
I like that you can almost feel how some of them might have been done,
yeah,
and like the fact that you can sometimes kind of tell they're special effects, but in a weird way that makes it more real. The
yeah,
fact that you can, imagine
yeah,
all the fake blood and
yeah.
what it must feel like to be covered in the stuff.
Exactly. And I think
Like,
that's why a film this gory. I mean, the version we watched was the Blu-ray one, where there's a little bit more gore in, I think. But the actual films are 15. The Blu-ray's an 18, but the movie itself. And I have watched the DVD, and I couldn't see any difference. I think if it was more realistic gore, it would definitely be an out and out 18.
I mean, the only gore sequence that I found difficult and I thought wouldn't have been out of place in a horror film is, I mean, I guess spoiler warning. But there's a torture scene with like someone's intestines hooked up to a bicycle, which then
Yeah,
got cycled out of them,
yeah.
and that's pretty nasty. I'd say that's the only
Yeah.
gore scene I found
There's a bit
like
with
disturbing in the way that I would,
yeah,
in a horror
even
film.
that's quite slapsticky.
Yeah,
Because it just wouldn't happen. Do you know what I mean? Or
yeah. I
without
mean, I don't
telling
know. I thought it might be vaguely possible. I mean, I
yeah,
haven't seen it done.
yeah, yeah. There's a bit where someone's face goes onto a grinder as well, which is quite bad. So it's kind of quite brief. But then it's other than that, it's like people getting chopped in half, but in a very cartoony way, isn't it? Um,
Yeah, it's a bit kind of Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness,
oh yeah,
even.
yeah. That's a very good point actually. That's I mean, you can see influences in this film from things like. I mean, there's a scene where a spin and blades going towards the character of Apple's face, and that
Mm.
really reminded me of something Sam Raimi would have done in Evil Dead.
Oh yeah, it definitely has some Sam Raimi
Yeah,
moments.
and I also said the film was very bright as well, so that sort of takes it away from feeling like a horror film. I mean, it did show at
Yeah.
Fright Fest, I think, and it has been in the UK shown on the Horror Channel. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
a
I
horror
can
film, but
imagine it going down well at Fright Fest.
yeah, it's got that sort of fun appeal. Yeah, the Saturday night late film there sort of
Mm,
thing. Um,
yeah.
but we mentioned the effects and the acting. What did you think the actual plot to it? I mean, this is the bit what sort of some people say is let the film down.
Yeah. Okay. So I did think it was a bit slight. I don't know how much that bothered me. There were times where I felt like it felt a bit like a short film that had been stretched out to feature length. But at the same time, it's not like there's much downtime in the film. You know, there aren't many scenes I'd say, oh, you should skip that because, you know, it really is action packed.
Yeah,
And I don't think the main appeal is the plot here anyway, so it doesn't matter that much.
exactly. And interesting, it was based on a short film called
Okay, that makes
Tears
sense.
for Turbo, which was in another film called The ABC of Death. It was a
Oh,
segment from
really? Was
that.
it?
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know until researching this. I knew it was a
Yeah.
short film, and I think that played at a festival. I think possibly Fantasia Festival, and
Hmm.
it done so well, they got money together to make this film.
Yeah, I think
Um,
there are a few films that came out of the ABCs of Death
yeah, so something
that
I've
were
never
then made
seen.
into
That's on
features.
if you're a film nerd like us, I think that's on either Amazon Prime or Shudder at the moment. So something worth checking out.
Yeah,
I
it's the
imagine I
kind of thing
haven't.
that'd be on Shudder.
Yeah, something I have wanted to watch. Just looking at the cast and the people who've made films for it. I think that must have been in about 2011 that was made.
Yeah, it's a while back now because there's been a sequel. There's an ABCs of Death 2
Yeah,
as well. There's a little bit of a spate of kind of horror anthology films
yeah.
around that time.
Okay, yeah. So worth checking out.
Yeah.
Maybe I can do a podcast on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, I keep meaning to properly watch it.
Go back to special effects again. Something else you might not have realised was they shot it in the desert and they had a very short time to do it. It actually kept raining, so they put on effects to make it look like acid rain in the future, and that's not what they wanted.
Oh,
But I think that helped and made the film look pretty cool.
yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. I
Yeah,
like it when, filmmakers find ways around adverse circumstances and work it in. That's
yeah,
cool.
and also it was in Canada and apparently freezing cold, and it's got that hot deserty feel about it, hasn't it? That you wouldn't think they were cold, um, which I
Yeah.
just think is another thing of them just doing so well with what they had.
Yeah, I mean, I get why it would be compared to Mad Max. Like the tone's really different, but I guess a lot of post-apocalyptic dystopian films are really kind of grey and drab and potentially a bit boring. Like, if you think of The Road, for
Yeah,
instance, as a really kind of worthy post-apocalyptic film, and it's all
yeah,
very kind of grey and brown and like washed out. But then there are a few of those kind of, I guess it maybe was more of an 80s thing because it's a bit of a nasty film, but I think of A Boy and His Dog.
that's one I've never seen. It keeps coming up in the list of things I should watch, um, and I saw it was on Prime, but a really poor copy of it. The transfer just looked bad.
Well, it's in the
So
public domain. Like
yeah,
you can legally watch it for free. So it's one
yeah,
of those films like Night of the Living Dead where,
yeah.
there's been all sorts of kind of copies of it because of the fact it's public domain. Yeah, it's worth a watch, but I think so. It's based on a Harlem Ellison short story, um, who did like that City on the Edge of Forever Star Trek episode and wrote "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream," and Ellison's he's a really compelling writer, but he totally has women issues. Like he was
Oh
definitely a
yeah,
misogynist. Like
yeah.
it's there, and like
Okay,
I don't think he's worthless as a writer, but
but
that does get in the way.
yeah,
And
especially if it
A Boy and His
really,
Dog has some pretty
okay,
unpleasant
because that's still
stuff in it, and
an
it does.
it's still an 18 certificate, I believe. Which
I'd imagine so.
yeah,
I think probably because of sexual violence,
yeah,
and it is weird because it's quite a fun film in a lot of ways. Like it's got a lot of dark comedy, but then it's got these really unpleasant, like
yeah.
misogynist feeling scenes that really kind of ruins the film. But that is one of the only apocalyptic films I can think of, a post-apocalyptic, that's quite colourful.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
That it has that kind of hyper-real, slightly zany, cartoony feel. And I do think I think that works quite well with. I guess Fallout does it as well. Like in video games, I think it's actually probably been done a bit more than in film.
yeah. There's one film it reminded me of the way it looked. 1986 Solo Babies. You heard of this?
Oh, I'm not
Solo
sure.
Warriors. It was called in this country.
Okay, I haven't seen it.
Can't think who directed it, but it's Mel Brooks actually produced it. It's not a comedy, but it's Jamie Gertz and Jason Patrick. A year later, they both ended up being in The Lost Boys.
Okay.
And it's about a group of kids in the future, and they play this weird sort of hockey game, and there's no water, and they're all it's a really sort of weird plot. Alexei Sayle pops up in it as well, surprisingly.
Oh yeah. Does he shout?
He does. And Sarah Douglas from Superman 2 is one of the villains as well. And it's just one of those. It's style. It looks brilliant, but the plot is a bit nothing. That's what's hard to sort of sum up. But the costumes and stuff are very much like Turbo Kid, and they all go about on roller skates. And it's a really bright film as well. So in style, it's very much like this. But the comedy isn't there. And I suppose with Turbo Kid, the comedy is all in. It kind of almost reminds me of Chaplin, because it's visual comedy, and then you've got that sentimental, the friendship between the kid and Apple.
And I guess the main character being called the kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's something I want to mention as well. The kid is the hero. He's a boy who's been reading these comics and then becomes the hero in the comic. And then there's this character I think is really interesting is Apple, the sidekick.
Yeah, I wasn't sure at first, because I thought at first it was just doing kind of manic pixie dream girl thing.
Yeah.
Like this really kind of wacky, kind of childlike, woman who like is there to make the main character's life magical. But then there's an important spoiler that I'm kind of loath to give away if you haven't watched it.
I think probably best not to, because we haven't done these spoilers yet, have we? But she reminded me to start with of kind of an anime character. But all I can say is it's not really a spoiler. I think the character within the film grows, and she starts off as, and it does. Their relationship starts off with he's just annoyed with her full stop when he first meets her.
Yeah.
When they first meet, she's clearly latched on to another character, another person, and then she just moves on. So you've got this, is she annoying? Does she, and possibly she's the character people most talk about from the film. If you type in Turbo Kid, for instance, into a GIF thing, you'll get a thing of her come up, not Turbo Kid.
Okay. I do think Lawrence LaBeouf was really great as Apple. It's a really kind of committed performance. I did find the character a bit annoying, but then it's tricky because she's kind of intended to be.
Yeah.
So
it's I say that, and I think that possibly because this is a film I've rewatched a lot of times in the 5 years now, and I think the character doesn't annoy me now, but on the first watch or so it did.
That's interesting.
You slightly warm to it. You can go the other way, because the first time I saw Phantom Menace, Jar Jar Binks didn't annoy me that much, but it does now. It's an interesting one. And then the other character of I don't know the character's name, but he's played by Aaron Jeffrey, the kind of Indiana Jones hero type.
Oh yeah,
and he's kind of forgotten, but he's a really funny character. A sweary cowboy.
He is really funny. It kind of feels like he's wandered in from a different film, but like that doesn't really matter. The fact that he feels quite out of place is pretty funny. It reminded me almost in a weird way, a bit different, but the narrator in The Big Lebowski, when you've got that old-timey cowboy character in The Big Lebowski.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I liked his whole because the other two sort of main characters quite innocent and sweet and almost timid, whereas he swears a hell of a lot,
Mm.
is up for violence, but also very a likable character, which is quite
Yeah.
difficult. I mean, the way he acts, you'd think he was a villain, but he isn't. And he actually, another thing I like about the character is there's lots of one-liners from him, the sort of thing you get in an Arnie film. Um,
Yeah, that's true. It does bring an extra dimension to the
yeah,
film and an
and,
extra thing in the mix.
yeah, and I think his scenes with Michael Ironside really work. He's got that
Yeah, yeah,
classic
definitely.
action kind of feel. And also one thing I forgot to mention, what I really like, and when I first saw it, is what got me was the fact that it says it's set in the future. Then they say it's 1987.
Mm.
Sorry, 1997. So
Yeah,
that really
97,
gives
yeah.
it that feel of this is made as if it's an 80s film. And the soundtrack really helps with that as well. Um,
Oh yeah, the soundtrack's great. Like lots of kind of dark wave synth music.
yeah, which really, it's one of the few instrumental soundtracks I've got that I play a lot.
I can imagine that.
It's just a really nice soundtrack. It really reminds me of just an 80s kids film, which when it's set against the action and gore is that weird mix, but it does feel right.
Mm.
And there's only two actual songs in it. There's is it Thunder in Your Heart, John Farnham at the beginning, which gives it that 80s feel. And that was written for a film called Rad, which I've never seen, but I
Oh.
think they got a catchy 80s whatever song they could get the rights to what felt right. I think that the film Rad is about possibly skateboarding, that sort of, or maybe even
Oh,
BMXs.
yeah, I think Sparks are on the soundtrack to it because I think like music that you could dance to. I think that Sparks album was like never released in the UK or something. So a lot of the tracks from it I had to get from like other albums the songs appeared on. And so I'm pretty sure I own a Sparks track from the Rad soundtrack on my iTunes.
It's a film I'll have to look up. And there's another song called No Tomorrow, which is by a French artist called the Matto. I think that's the pronounced the Mattos. And
Oh yeah.
they released a music video to that a year or so after the film, which is the prequel of Apple's character, how she
Oh
became
yeah.
Phil.
Yeah, I
Um,
should make some time to watch that.
yeah, it's the, the music's pretty cool, to be honest. It's basically like the instrumental stuff with lyrics over it, but it's a nice little short film they've made to go before this. Which they've also released a prequel comic to go along with it as well, which to me shows it's got that following for a small film like this that at the box office only profited I think $7,000 on top of but obviously it's done well on video and so video. What year is this on DVD and streaming? I think it has over the years become a hit.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see like a comic come out and there's a really short run of action figures as well.
Yeah, and
Um,
I saw that there's a video game in the works.
yeah, that's coming out in a month or so, and it's made to look like look and play like an 80s game. It's got that sort of Atari Paperboy feel about it.
I've actually legitimately completed Paperboy 2.
Really? No, you couldn't have done.
Yep,
Oh,
honestly, I promise I've completed Paperboy 2.
oh.
Like, it's a lot. I'm not going to lie about that. That's a lot of hard hours.
Yeah. So I had to go on it recently on a simulator thing, and it was
Yeah.
terrible. I just kept throwing the newspapers and smashing windows. I
Oh,
used
yeah.
to think I was good at it. But it's
The,
when you
the,
get
the trick is saving the baby. You've got to save the baby. Because there's
I think
the escape baby that goes past, and like that gets you the points.
okay, I'll go back on it after
Yeah,
this.
that's my trick for Paperboy 2.
Yeah.
Save the runaway baby. You'll do all right.
What else was I going to say? I think we sort of touched on it as well. I mean, a film like this, which is, I've found it really difficult to. This is a film I've been raving about, but just to get people to watch it, I think it's that people just think it's a bit silly, which it kind of is. But what sort of, I think you touched on before, it's kind of the horror audience would like it, and
Oh yeah, I definitely think people who like horror comedies, even though it's weird because it's not a horror film, but it does tick a lot of the right boxes.
yeah, yeah,
Um, the reason I was a bit resistant and hadn't watched it earlier is because I don't really like superhero movies. And I thought, it would
Yeah,
just be like a tribute to superhero films. I don't really like sort of that much in the way of Marvel and DC stuff. And yeah, it's much more like an anime superhero,
yeah.
like Astro Boy or something, than it is. It
Yeah.
doesn't really feel like a superhero film to me.
No, no. I think the name of it would make you think it is, and the fact
Yeah,
that there's so many superhero films been released in the last decade or so.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
to me, it's closer to the likes of almost even RoboCop and things like that, opposed to straight out superhero. Um,
Yeah, and it's got all these sort of 80s like kids adventure film vibes.
yeah,
Like, yeah, it is basically a kids film for adults, but
yeah,
in a good way. That
yeah.
sounds like derogatory, but
I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I think that might be what works about it because the people who are old enough to get what it's sort of a tribute to have grown up with it. I mean, it'd be interesting to show this to someone who's just turned 18 to see what they think of it because they might not
mm.
appreciate it as much as what you and I will have done.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think, I really liked it. I didn't love it as much as you, and I do suspect it might just be because I'm, only a few years older, but in terms of pop culture references, it can make all the difference because I think it probably wasn't as intensely nostalgic for me. And I don't have any older siblings, so
yeah,
I really didn't grow up with any pop culture that was just before my time at all.
yeah,
Unlike Antonia, say, who also got two older brothers and so very much grew up with their stuff.
yeah,
So I think, like, I didn't have quite as much nostalgic feelings watching it as I
yeah,
imagine you and Antonia have.
yeah. So, the listeners don't know, Antonia's about my age. We're
Yeah.
more or less the same. Um, and yeah, little things like, I mean, I suppose a lot of people wouldn't know who Michael Ironside is, so that would be lost on them, the fact he's the
Hmm.
villain. But I think people who like silly, fun films would appreciate it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, I didn't get all the nostalgia, but I still really liked it.
Yeah,
You definitely don't have to get all the references or
yeah.
anything.
I mean, there's not actually that many references to certain films. It's more genres of films.
Yeah.
So that's why, to me, it doesn't go in the spoof market.
That's
Of
a
a,
good point, and it's not like a sort of Edgar Wright film. It's not like Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz.
no, no. So I mean, that's possibly why it stands out to me because it's like something we've all seen so many times before, but done so differently.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, it is very much its own thing.
Yeah. And interestingly as well, the fact that it's got three directors um, might really help for it because you've got three different people putting their input. As long as these three people get on, I think that could really
Huh,
benefit
yeah.
something. I can't think of another film apart from a film which is done in segments, like we mentioned earlier with the ABC of Death. I can't think of another film that has had three directors, unless
I
someone's
mean, I
been
guess there
fired
are
or something.
ones where directors have been like removed from like,
Yeah,
you know, like I know Wizard of Oz obviously famously, went through various hands.
yeah, but it's
But
credited to one director, though, isn't it? In the end,
yeah,
and there's
ultimately.
the same with say Bohemian Rhapsody more recently.
Yeah.
Um, but people working together, I can't think of another example of three.
That's a really good point because and often like yeah when it does get passed to someone else it can be to the detriment. Like I'm a bit of an apologist. This is probably one of your podcasts really actually for us to do it. So I'm a bit of an apologist for Monkey Bone, the Henry Selick film with Brendan Fraser. Um, like I think it's got amazing art direction, but
Yeah,
it's got all these terrible like teenage fart jokes. But then
yeah,
I read a really interesting like Instagram post, I think, by Rose McGowan, saying that like the reason Monkey Bone ends up being really flawed and having these kind of stupid teenage frat jokes is because the project was actually taken off Henry Selick about halfway through. Like the studio thought it was just like too weird and wouldn't sell, and then they deliberately tried to shift it to a more of a kind of teenage market,
okay, yeah,
and so they kind of just inserted all of this juvenile humor. Um, so that's definitely an instance where like having multiple or at least two directors I think really ruins the film to a degree,
yeah. I mean
whereas
that's
yeah
And also that film Bond, didn't it? It didn't do very well at
Mm.
all. And I've not seen it. A few years ago, I was looking for it actually, when sort of all the stuff come out about Brendan Fraser and he's sort of having his comeback.
Yeah.
I wanted to watch it because I thought I'd never seen it, and I can't get hold of it. I bought really cheaply the film Inkheart the other day with him in.
Oh yeah.
And I've not seen that either. And I think when his career sort of started to go down a bit, he was in a few big budget films that just proper bombed and no one really saw.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've got a copy of it somewhere, but I'd have to find it. Like, I might have ended up giving it to someone, to be honest.
Yeah. But you say it's definitely worth a watch anyway.
Oh yeah. I mean, the art direction's amazing. I mean, this is Henry Selick, who did Nightmare Before Christmas and Coraline and James the Giant Peach.
Yeah.
So off the back of those that it's going to look amazing, and it does.
He's the bloke who directed films that everyone thinks Tim Burton directed.
Yeah, I know. I will say that to my students. Like, I was saying that just today because I was doing electron theory, actually recording one, and about Burton. I was saying basically I feel sorry for Henry Selick because all of his films people think Burton directed them.
Yeah, and then the surprising one is people think that he done Coraline.
I know, and Burton had literally nothing to do with Coraline.
Did he not co-produce it or something, or did he not?
Nope, I don't think he even produced it. Like, it's not
really?
like James the Giant Peach, where I think he might have been co-producer or something. Because
obviously the confusion in Nightmare Before Christmas because it's called Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah, and to be fair, like, you can really see how the character designs in that are based off Burton's drawings.
Yeah, with that one, I get it, but so many people seem to think James and Giant Peach is directed by him.
I know,
and it's not fair, is it? But then again, I mean, I suppose that at first Nightmare Before Christmas didn't do very well, so maybe at the time he was probably like, oh well, whatever, let Tim Burton take the blame. And then 25 years later, it's this classic. So, but a good director. Is he still directing? Is he still?
Selick, he's still. I mean, obviously, he started Leica, who also have gone on to do Box Trolls and Paranorman, and Kubo, and so like I think he's still, doing sort of production stuff, but he hasn't directed anything feature length since Coraline. I think, which was like 2008 or something.
Yeah, but I think a really really good film. That's one I haven't read the kids' book about it, but
it's good. But yeah, I think the film's better.
Okay, good. Right, so just back to Turbo Kid. I mean, it's the three directors, and they write it as well, produced. They're a film team called RKSS, who I think people should look into. They've done a film a couple of years later called The Summer of '84.
Yeah, I remember coming across that on Shudder, but I failed to make time to check it out. Is it worth watching?
I think so. It's no Turbo Kid, but it's a really good. The basic premise is some kids in the 80s, as in 1984, suspect their neighbour's a murderer. So it's got a bit of the Burbs about it. But what I like about it is the kids feel real. The way they talk to each other, the way they act, actually reminds me of when I was a kid. Unlike a lot of films that are made to that market. I mean, even when I watch Stranger Things, I don't think that's how I acted as a kid. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's quite violent and it's quite sweary. I think it's definitely a 15, if not an 18. And it kind of went under the radar. It done the festival circuit, and I first watched it because I bought it on Amazon Prime. But yeah, I think it's still on Shudder. So I would recommend to listeners watch Turbo Kid, and then if you like it, but you want something that a bit less comic, go and watch some Summer '84 because I'm sure they've got other stuff in the pipeline. There's Turbo Kid 2 still meant to be being made.
Okay, cool.
But I think with everything what's happened with the pandemic, lockdowns and stuff, it's been delayed. So it'll probably be called Turbo Man now because he'll be getting on. I think he was 25. He was 25 when he made this. So
yeah, he doesn't look that like you can tell he's slightly older, but then that makes sense, right? Yeah. Because so many 80s films have have people older than kids playing kids. So.
Exactly. I always think of it. It was made in the 70s, but Grease when all the kids are 40. So yeah, I mean, we've sort of covered it. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about the film?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered it pretty well. I like the fact, and this is something Antonio liked, that like Turbo Man, like the superhero who he's been reading about in the comics and based himself on, turns out to be real within the
Yeah, yeah,
universe.
yeah. That's I kind of like that about it because it makes no sense. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's just that's almost because he falls down a hole, doesn't he? Or where the costume and everything from Turbo Man is. And I thought it was going to turn out that he'd knocked himself out or something, and it was all a dream. But no, it isn't. It's just he's found them.
Yeah.
So I think that it's quite cool that this real superhero has comic books about him, which is kind of I don't know. But it's like we said before, the plot doesn't really matter, but things like that I find quite fun. It's just
Yeah.
it's totally in the concept of the film. It works, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and the helmet that doesn't fit or is got some blood in it or something, so he wears his motorbike, his BMX helmet. It's just a little bit of to make him his own character. And of course, we didn't mention that we all want to make ourselves a GNOME stick.
Which, yeah. GNOME on the end of the stick. Yeah, great weapon. And possibly the reason why I thought of Brain Dead, because in Brain Dead, a garden gnome is used as a weapon and ends up kind of embodied in like the kind of headless like stump of a zombie.
Yeah. So I think that is a little nod to that.
Yeah, maybe.
Pretty sure. I mean, and it was it's a French Canadian film, but so some of the production was done, or post production in New Zealand. Some funding from there.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's that sort of from that part of cinema, really, isn't it? With Brain Dead and Bad Taste. Cool. So so you would recommend it? I've got to ask.
I definitely recommend it. Yeah,
I've got to ask your rating. Did we do out of 5 or out of 10? I can't remember.
Gosh,
let's do it out of 5.
Oh, I mean, I can't really do. I mean, out of 5, I guess I'd give it 3.5. So, yeah, not quite 4 stars for me. So I'll say 3.5.
Okay, so that's 7 out of 10.
I can't say 3 stars. That would be too little.
Yeah, but I think for what it is, I mean, when I've reviewed this on things, I've given it initially. I gave it, I think, 4, but on repeat watching for what it is, personally for me. But this podcast is about the films that I sort of want to push on people, if that makes sense. But this for me is a 5, just because it's the sort of film you'd expect to be fun, but not as fun as it is.
That is really true. Like, I think possibly because of it not quite hitting my nostalgia feels, like it's never going to be like my favorite film or anything. But I'm really glad I watched it, and it is a great deal of fun. And I say Antonio and I watched Little Joe over the weekend, and I liked Jessica Housener's previous film, but guys, it was like the opposite to Turbo Kid. You know, like taking himself really seriously and trying to be very kind of worthy and talking about issues. And it did make me think, I wish I was watching Turbo Kid.
I often think that when I'm watching things. But also, I mean, Turbo Kid's one of those. I was away for a sort of a work course recently, and we'd been to a pub after, had a few beers, and my business partner who I shared the hotel with, we got back and it was on the horror channel. And I'm
wow.
This film is perfect for that. He fell asleep and I watched it for about the 50th time. But it is that, it's just the sort of film why I love B movies and stuff is sometimes you come across something like this. And if I'd have been flicking over the channels at 1 a.m. and caught one of the action scenes, I'd have definitely been researching what this is. Getting a hold of it, you know. So that's pretty well. Thanks for chatting about it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Andy.
Cheers. It was good to catch up with Adam there and chat about a film that, well, I clearly love. We will do an episode, or at least a feature on an episode on Monkey Bone that we mentioned in that conversation. I've ordered a copy of it on DVD and I'm going to watch it, and then for the next series we'll either focus on that for a whole episode or mention it in passing. And next time Adam's on, I guess. While we were doing that interview, I actually got a message from another guy who's been on the show several times, Andrew Stratton, who's watching Turbo Kid as we were doing it. So I quickly got on Zoom again and just had a very quick word with him on his thoughts. So this is what Andrew had to say. Okay, I'm here with Andrew, who's also just watched Turbo Kid. We'll end the show with his quick thoughts on it. Well, what did you think?
Oh, it was pretty cool, wasn't it? It's sort of 80s nostalgia fest. Not too self-indulgent in that regard, so that's always handy, but an awful lot of fun. Always nice to hear it of John Farnham. Hey, always nice to see people get their heads chopped off. Michael Ironside's still the man.
Cool. Do you have any expectations going in?
No, not really. I'd not even heard of it, to be honest. It sort of completely passed me by, really, until quite recently.
Yeah, cool. And a quick ratings out of 5?
Oh, I reckon solid 4, if not higher.
Excellent. And would you go and see the sequel if it came to the cinemas?
Oh, well, yeah, if they're doing one, yeah, I'll be there.
There's rumours of a sequel, but we don't know. So we'll keep it brief, but we'll get you back properly when I do the second series of this year, and we'll talk about some older films that you may not have seen.
Well, I've hardly seen any, so should bode well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks so much to everyone who's listened. Please share it, comment, anything you want to do with it. Criticise us, I don't care. It's all meant to be a bit of fun anyway. Big thanks to Adam and Andrew for your help this show. Hopefully we'll be back in a month or so, a few months, who knows, but soon with Series 2. We'll be discussing more films that probably didn't do so well or didn't get so critically acclaimed, but I and many others grew up loving. Some of the films to feature will be Solo Warriors or Solo Babies if you're American. 1984's Supergirl, Labyrinth, which a lot of people think was a big hit and critically acclaimed, but actually wasn't at the time. Return of the Swamp Thing, which is a DC early movie that I really, really liked as a kid, and many, many more. So thanks a lot, and hopefully you'll hear from me soon, and get in contact, yeah, please do. My phone just went off. Did you hear that? That was Elvira on my messenger there. And I do Elvira as well, the first movie that she made, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. That'll be coming in Season 2, which is coming very, very soon.